Om Tavakatamritam Tajivanam Kaviriyaditam Kalmashapaham Sharavanamangalam Srimadatam Bhuvigananti Purirajana. Your words are like nectar, bring life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome, everyone, to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We are on the chapter M at Dakshineswar, Part 1, and the date is Monday, December 24th, 1883. And this is getting towards the end of M's long stay at Dakshineswar. It's almost 2 weeks now that he's been with him. And we're on page 363. And Sri Ramakrishna has been talking to M. And who else is there? We'll see who else is there later. Yeah, the setting is that it was the evening, and Sri Ramakrishna was sitting on the floor of his room with the devotees. Surendra is there, M and others, and talking about the Shiva Samhita. Through the practice of spiritual discipline, one attains perfection by the grace of God, but one must also labor a little. Now, we always have this big conflict. Huh? Is it through effort? Is it through grace? Here it says both. It's if we feel the inspiration to struggle to realize God, that's also a type of grace. That desire for liberation, that longing for realization is a type of grace. So Thakur, as much as he talks about grace, he also emphasizes spiritual practice. And with the great, because if we have tremendous longing for something, won't we do something about it? It doesn't do to just simply have a great longing for God realization and not strive for it. So Thakur puts the equal emphasis on striving, and it's that striving which will awaken that grace. So through the practice of spiritual discipline, one attains perfection by the grace of God. One must also labor a little. Now, Thakur's understanding of what a little is and our understanding are completely different. For him, labor a little probably is way more than we're willing to do. If we think of what he did in his life and what he had the direct disciples do and his other disciples do, it's a tremendous amount. So it's a little bit in comparison with what we get in return. If we talk about we have to pay a little bit to get something of great value, it'll be something like that. But it's a little bit deceiving, false advertising. Labor a little bit. It means start a little bit, and then as you get the taste for it, increase and increase. Then one sees God and enjoys bliss. If a man hears that a jar filled with gold is buried at a certain place, he rushes there and begins to dig. He sweats as he goes on digging. See, it's not so easy. Huh? As he goes on digging, after much digging, he feels the spade strike something. Then he throws away the spade and looks for the jar. At the sight of the jar, he dances for joy. Then he takes up the jar and pours out the gold coins. He takes them into his hand, counts them, and feels the ecstasy of joy. Vision, touch, enjoyment. Isn't it so? M. Yes, sir. The master was silent a moment and then went on. Master, those who are my own will come here even if I scold them. Look at Narendra's nature. At first, he used to abuse my mother Kali very much. One day I said to him sharply, "Rascal, don't come here anymore." He slowly left the room and prepared to smoke. He who is one's own will not be angry, even if scolded. What do you say? There was another period when Sri Ramakrishna also tested Narendra. I think it was something like a month that he kept coming and Thakur wouldn't look at him, wouldn't talk to him or anything. And Narendra, he would just come and bow down, stay for a while, maybe go talk to Hazra, come back. But he kept coming. So one day Thakur asked him, why do you keep coming? I don't even look at you. And he said, I don't come so that you'll be nice and sweet and talk to me. I come to see you because I love you. Thakur was very happy. He said, I was just testing you. So he who is one's own will not be angry even if scolded. What do you say? M. That is true, sir. Master. Narendra is perfect from his very birth. He is devoted to the ideal of the formless God. M. Smiling. Whenever he comes here, he brings along great excitement. Sri Ramakrishna smiled and said, yes, excitement indeed. The following day was Tuesday, the Ekadashi day of the lunar fortnight. It was 11 o'clock in the morning, and the master had not yet taken his meal. M., Rakal, and other devotees were sitting in the master's room. Master to M. One should fast on the 11th day of the lunar fortnight, Ekadashi. That purifies the mind and helps one to develop love of God. Isn't that so? M. Yes, sir. Master. But you may take milk and puffed rice, don't you think so? Yeah, I was so surprised when I first found out what it meant to fast. Especially, I don't know about the rest of India, but especially in Bengal. You can fill your stomach with that type of fast. Mostly you can't take rice. And then there may be other things that you can't take, but eating luchi and fruit and all sorts of things, also considered a type of fast. When I first read Thakur's, one of his analogies is he talks about the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law observing the fast separately on the same day, even though I was thinking, well, what's the difference? They're not eating anything. Huh? But it turns out observing the fast means that you're still preparing some things and eating some things. So Thakur was never one to press this idea of that type of austerity. In fact, he used to tell women devotees, that he didn't like to see them come fasting, that it hurt him a little bit. He didn't, and if the mind was only thinking about food, then it's not such a helpful thing. Otherwise, a little bit of self-control and everything is good. To be able to do that on special days, to do that type of fasting is good. Thakur told him on another occasion also that he should observe this Ekadashi. So at least in his case, Thakur recommended that. We're in a new chapter, chapter 18, M at Dakshineswar, part 2. Now, why it's broken down into part 1 and part 2, after M has been there already for about 12 days, I'm not exactly sure, but that's the way that he arranged the chapters. So now it's December 26th, 1885. So on 25th, we don't have anything. The last entry was on the 24th.
No, there is one on the 25th of December in Bengali. That is the Krishna Pokhir Akaros.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, we'll have to find out what. Huh?
That was Tuesday.
Yeah, sometimes it'll be skipped. Sometimes it'll be put in some other place. For those who don't know what's happening, one of our devotees is following along in the Bengali, and there is an entry for the 25th. How much is it?
No, just a few lines.
Just a few lines. Okay. So it may not be anything of great significance. Anyhow, this is page 365, Emet Dakshineswar, part 2, chapter 18, December 26, 1883. Sri Ramakrishna, accompanied by Manilal Malik, M., and several other devotees, was in a carriage on his way to Ram's new garden. This is Ram Chandra Datta. This garden house is something that Ram had purchased and built up and everything during Thakur's lifetime. This is the first time that Sri Ramakrishna is going there. This is in a place called Konnagar, and we know it as Yogodyan. This is the Garden of Yoga. It's a very, very significant place in our order that Thakur went many times, and a good portion of his relics are interred there. And the property, it's one of our big centers. Many of the vice presidents of the order stayed. There was a tradition for a long time that at least one of the vice presidents would stay there as the head of that center. And it's really one of the great pilgrimage places we have. We've probably done it before, but I wanted to go through a little bit of the biography of Ram Chandra Datta, because he plays a very significant role. He's mentioned many, many times in the gospel. Thakur was very beloved to Sri Ramakrishna, and Sri Ramakrishna was really everything to him. He was one of the early ones, outside of of course, the Pandits who came earlier, but of the later devotees, to proclaim Sri Ramakrishna as an avatar. So let me read just a little bit. He came from a very devout Vaishnava family. At the beginning of his life, as a result of it's a lot of intellectual types of thinking, he became a very logical person, but atheist, Gnostic. So we find that with many of them, that before they came to Sri Ramakrishna, they had no faith, some hidden type of faith, but nothing, at least intellectually, agnostic, we can say. Then suddenly, one of his daughters died, and this was the beginning of his search into the real meaning of life. Manamohan Mitra was Mash Tutu Bhai. What does that mean? Yeah, cousin on the mother's side or something. Yeah, so cousin on the mother's side. And it was with him that he first went to Dakshineswar. This is in 1879, in order to see Sri Ramakrishna. They all felt that this would help him get over his grief if he went there. And as soon as he saw him, he felt some peace at heart. And he began to go very often, and soon began to look upon him as Aradhya Devata, really the object of his worship, we can say, very beloved to him. And Thakur went to his house, and anyhow, as a result of all of this, he underwent a great change in his life. And he and Manamohan Babu, they went together to, the two of them started proclaiming him to be an avatar, and even give lectures during Thakur's lifetime. They would speak publicly, the Prachar, they would speak publicly about him as an avatar. Thakur would get annoyed sometimes at this, but anyhow, they would do that. And during Sri Ramakrishna's lifetime, he wrote several things. This Tattva Sada, Tattva Prakashika. He wrote actually one of the early biographies of Sri Ramakrishna. And he wrote a book about the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. And he published a monthly magazine, Tattva Manjari. So he did a lot of things. And then with the Thakur's permission, or through his grace, then he bought this garden house, which we know as Yogodyan. And Thakur, of course, went there. And after giving up his body, then this mandir, the temple, was established there. And most of you know the story that after Thakur's passing away, when the relics were there, they didn't know what to do with it, that the householder devotees, who were all a little older than the future monastic disciples, they all agreed, as Ram said, we'll keep the relics there at the this Konnagar, his garden house there. And the young boys, especially Narendra, they said, but Thakur told me that wherever you place me, carry me on your shoulders, that's where I'll stay. So they had this big dilemma what to do. They didn't want to see it buried there. They wanted the relics to be be able to be kept at the future monastery of the order. So secretly, they removed actually the greater portion of it, and it wasn't just householders versus the monks, because M was also involved, and I think they kept it above Rambosa's house for some time. And then later, of course, that was called the Atmarama, that was used for worship at the time of initiation. Then with Balamat, it was installed there. But a good portion there of Thakur's relics, the ashes and everything, are still at this Konnagar. And he passed away in 1899 on 17th January. So that's Ram Chandra Datta. Doesn't mention it here, but he was a relative of Narendra, the same Datta family. I don't know how close it was. Maybe, not sure what the relationship was, but they were definitely relatives. Okay, so that's Ram. So the garden, which Ram had recently purchased, was next to Surendra's. This was a very common thing in those days, people with a little bit of money. This we know with Jadu Malik, he had his house in Kolkata, and he had his garden house right at the southern entrance to the Dakshineswar temple. The Surendra also did the same thing, so then Ram did it also. They were kind of, you could say, outlying suburbs of Kolkata at that time, these areas. Ram adored the master as an incarnation of God. He visited Sri Ramakrishna frequently at Dakshineswar. Manilal Malik was a member of the Brahmo Samaj. The Brahmos do not believe in divine incarnations. Many things they didn't care too much about. They didn't like the guru, worship of the guru. They didn't like all these gods and goddesses. They didn't like any type of image worship. And extreme non-dualism also they didn't like. I am he. They worship the formless God with loving attributes. A little bit, they felt it was the Upanishadic ideal, and kind of looking upon God as Father. A little bit of a Christian ideal, a little bit of the Upanishadic ideal, without this real oneness. Master Tumanilal. In order to meditate on God, one should try at first to think of him as free from upadhis, limitations. Now, we know Thakur, when he spoke to individuals, he would speak to them knowing what would be helpful for them and knowing what their spiritual ideal was and looking at it from their point of view. And at the same time, if he felt that there was anything lacking, he would try to correct it. So he did two things. Sometimes he would encourage them along to follow that same spiritual ideal. And if he felt that they were too one-sided or they were missing something, then he would also try to fill that in, correct that a little bit. So here he's saying, at first, one should try. Now, is this so that we'll realize how difficult it is? Or is it that it'll be a good, helpful way to begin meditation on God with form? It's not clear here, but we know many of the gurus of our order will ask us to meditate on God, a formless aspect of God, like the ocean, and then see that forms the waves of some divine form, something like that. There are different techniques of entering into this meditation on God with form. Anyhow, he says, in order to meditate on God, one should try at first to think of him as free from upadhis, limitations. God is beyond upadhis. So this is not our imagination to try to think of God free from upadhis. It's the truth if we want to think of it that way. Thakur is not saying that just imagine this. He's saying look at that aspect of God. That this is that transcendent aspect of the Nirguna Brahman. God is beyond upadhis. He is beyond speech and mind, but it is very difficult to achieve perfection in this form of meditation. So he's always telling the Brahmos that what you're doing is good, but it's a little one-sided and it's a little dry and it's difficult. This idea of worship of the infinite, the Nirguna Brahman is difficult. It goes back to the Gita and other texts. Gita is very strong. We know in our chapter 12 that klesha adhikarita, that it's more difficult to do, and it's only for those who have a great deal of renunciation, non-attachment to the world, uh, not much ambition to do anything in the world other than God realization. It's really traditionally it was for sadhus and only those certain types of sadhus that can really bold and heroic, that can live under a tree and not care for anything. Otherwise, we accept this jnana yoga uh, and try to incorporate it bhakti yoga. We try to have a little bit of a nice integration of all the different yogas. We're talking about here this exclusive following of jnana yogas, very difficult thing. But it is easy to meditate on an incarnation, God born as man. Now, easy in the sense that we have something to focus the mind on. If we sit and try to focus the mind on that which is formless, then the mind has nothing to hold on to unless we use some type of symbol. We think of the vast sky or the ocean, something like that. But if we're thinking of an incarnation, avatar, and then especially in the case of Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, we have their photographs and everything. We have their words. So relatively easy. Nothing about meditation is easy, but relatively easy. Yes, God in man. The body is a mere covering. It is like a lantern with a light burning inside, or like a glass case in which one sees precious things. So this is taking place while they're in the carriage. This is all the M records of this little conversation. Arriving at the garden, the master got out of the carriage and accompanied Ram and the other devotees to the sacred Tulsi grove. One of the things, the Vaishnava family, so one of the things that he did, there's a little pond there and there's a little Tulsi grove. This is considered a very sacred thing, especially in Vaishnava families. And Thakur liked all these things also. He was very charmed when he went to this Kankaragachi house. Standing near it, he said, "Ah, how nice. It is a fine place. You can easily meditate on God here." Sri Ramakrishna sat down in the house which stood to the south of the lake. Ram offered him a plate of fruit and sweets, which he enjoyed with the devotees. After a short time, he went around the garden. So this is the first time there. He's going to see everything there. Next, Sri Ramakrishna proceeded toward Surendra's garden. I've never been there. I don't know if it's still there. Is it there? Not there. Don't know. But apparently it was just right next to that neighboring property. He walked on foot a little distance and saw a sadhu sitting on a couch under a tree. At once he went up to the holy man and joyfully began a conversation with him. Master, to which order of monks do you belong? Have you any title, giri, puri, or the like? In monastic traditions, we have the different sampradayas. They talk about four main sampradayas in the Vaishnava tradition. And then the Shankara sampradaya, there's Ramanuja and Madhva, the Nimbarka, the Vallabhacharya, all different. These are traditions where not only the Acharya who founded it, that a tradition that goes to him, they'll trace it back to some divine source. So Shri Sampradaya, they'll take it back to the Divine Mother herself. Shankaracharya, they take it back to Dattatreya. I think. So there's some tradition like that within the Shankaracharya's Dashanami Sampradaya. There are 10 different uh, monastic traditions there, and they all have a different last name, Giri Puri, like that. So he's asking about that. Uh, we're Puris because of Toto Puri. So, and each one of these has its own one of the four mattas that's considered home base somehow. So we belong to Sringeri Mutt and the Puri Sampradaya, which is part of the Dashanami uh, Sampradaya of Shankaracharya. This is really a kind of courtesy. You meet a monk very often, they won't ask about where were you born and anything, what was your pre-monastic life, nothing like that. But they can ask, what is your sampradaya? What do you belong to? Sadhu. People call me a Paramahamsa. Now, he's not bragging or anything, but this will be also maybe not an official type of sampradaya, but it means free from all of these uh, different outer marks of a sadhu. There's Paramahamsa. Sri Ramakrishna is a Paramahamsa that way. Doesn't even have to wear garawa if he doesn't want to. Doesn't have to have any marks on the forehead or do any of those rituals or anything. Really, a very free type, and we're considered very high type Paramahamsa. And generally, they'll also not be very ritualistic, not be very dualistic. So Sri Ramakrishna is assuming that he is a real jnana yogi. Master, that is good. I am Shiva. That is a good attitude. But I must tell you something else. Now, this is what I said before. He'll inspire him. Yes, there's a very good attitude, but don't be too one-sided. But I must tell you something else. The process of creation, preservation, and destruction that is going on day and night is due to Shakti, the power of God. So there'll be some, the jnanis, who don't care too much for this idea of Shakti. If they have to explain this, the creation of the universe, they'll say that it's due to Maya, some false reading, not exactly real, not completely unreal, but they'll have their own type of interpretation. And Sri Ramakrishna, for him, he felt that the easiest and maybe best way to understand this is in terms of Shakti, that there's a power within Brahman, that at least this Chit Shakti, there's a power to create this universe, and there's power to dwell within the universe, to pervade the universe, and then withdraw the universe. Uphold it and pervade it, to enter into everything, but also be the ground of everything, the Shakti. So he liked this idea. We were talking about this the other day. We call this the Shakta philosophy, but I don't know that there's any real authoritative text or authoritative commentary, anything comparable to what we have with these other Advaita Vedanta, with these commentaries on Brahma Sutra and Upanishads and Gita or anything. Probably some of the tantras, but automatically that doesn't have the same authority in the Vedic tradition. It has to go back to the Shruti for it to be, for the very orthodox people to consider it authoritative. It's to be considered a real sampradaya, you have to have a commentary on the Prasthanatraya, the Upanishads. They will. They will, just as the Chaitanya Sampradaya, if he has one at all, this with Jiva Goswami and everything, they trace everything back to the Bhagavata, and then try to show the Bhagavata is considered the fifth Veda. So they'll try to tie it in, and then later they also have commentaries on the Brahma Sutra, the Baladeva, and everything. But the very orthodox people won't accept it. They'll also do that. They'll try to connect. They didn't care probably, and I also don't know very much about it. This is Yamanacharya or who they were. Somebody we'll have to ask somebody authoritative who can explain it to us.
Shakti,
Yeah,
is it originated from Bengal only or elsewhere?
I don't know. The Shakti philosophy. I mean, if we think about it, this idea of Shakti goes all the way back. The very ancient idea that even with all the deities, Brahma and Saraswati, they'll all have their Shakti associated with them. This Shiva and Shakti, this combination, Shiva and Shakti, is very ancient. It we see in this Mahendra Daro and other archaeological digs, these images and things of Shiva and Shakti, this Ardhanarishwara, this idea. So it's a very ancient idea also, that everything is seen as a combination of the male and the female, Shiva and Shakti, that idea. So I must tell you something else. The process of creation, preservation, and destruction that is going on day and night is due to Shakti, the power of God. This primal power, Adya Shakti, and Brahman are one and the same, or this abheda, this idea, one and the same, not that they're identical, but they're inseparable. Not that we can't understand Shakti is a different substance and attribute are different things, but they're inseparable. We can't have one without the other. Shakti cannot exist without Brahman, just as waves cannot exist without water. There cannot be an instrumental music without an instrument. So we never find any attribute that's not an attribute of a substance, and we never find any substance without an attribute. We can't have a chair that's not, it doesn't have a certain shape and form and color, and we will never find a color that's not an attribute of an object, even if it's the sky or the ocean or something. It's got to be of something. So these two things go hand in hand. Abheda, meaning not that they're identical in the sense that we can't distinguish subject and object, but we can't even think of one without the other. So that means that consciousness and the creative power cannot be two separate things. The fire and the power to burn, it's consciousness. If consciousness alone exists, then where does this creative power inhere? How do we understand it? If not as inhering within consciousness itself. So consciousness has to be the power to project thought or project this kind of universe, something like that. So for Thakur to look upon this Nirguna Brahman as the only reality was not getting the full weight of the bell fruit. That we have to understand Saguna and Nirguna both belong to the same form and formlessness, to the same reality. This is one of the really main teachings. If we have to try to find a philosophy that we can say was Sri Ramakrishna's philosophy, this is the closest that we can come to, I think. Otherwise, he accepts everything. He likes all of them, all the paths. But this seems to be the one that he feels most comfortable with, at least. As long as God keeps us in his relative world, so long do we feel that there are two Shiva and Shakti. There's the seer and the seen. There's Purusha and Prakriti. That will make that type of distinction. And also that there'll be distinction, or everything between ourselves and other people. If one accepts Shakti, one accepts the Brahman as well. If one is aware of night, one is also aware of day. So they're not identical in that sense, but we can't have one without the other. They're two sides of the same coin. If one is aware of knowledge, one is also aware of ignorance. But there is another state in which God reveals to his devotee that Brahman is beyond both knowledge and ignorance. It cannot be described in words. What exists, exists. So the difference between Sri Ramakrishna and many dualistic devotional teachers is that he equally accepts, and not only does he accept the truth of this Nirguna Brahman, but that everything ends in that. Everything ends in oneness. His point is, what is the easiest way to reach that, to get to the roof? What ladder is easiest? Ladder, or do we want to just climb a rope? Not, most of us can't do that. We're not strong enough. So he's talking to this sadhu. Huh? He's still talking to him, trying to see. He's never met him. He hasn't asked him, "What is your spiritual ideal?" All these are Paramahamsa. So Thakur didn't have to ask all of these questions. He could sense by seeing a person. So he's somehow he must know that this is his ideal. And really, sadhus at that time, aside from these Vaishnava sadhus in Bengal who were part of this Chaitanya movement, these Vairagis. Other than that, from the Shankaracharya tradition, they were mostly these non-dualists, staunch non-dualists. So he's saying, yeah, that's fine, that I also accept that, but you have to accept the relative as well as the absolute, the Nitya and Lila. That was one of the things that that's why he was so broad-minded, and he didn't see anything from a limited point of view. So everything from every angle. Nitya Lila equally real, that transcendent reality and that the immanent God dwelling within everything and manifesting as everything. After a pleasant conversation with the sadhu, the master returned to the carriage, the holy man walking with him. Sri Ramakrishna looked upon him as a friend of long acquaintance, and they walked arm in arm. Now, this is a very interesting thing, that there's a certain bond among those who renounce everything, different monastic traditions, even among different religions. I've seen this at these interfaith conferences and things, that if we meet monks from other traditions, we feel a bond with them. Somehow we know that they've renounced everything. Whole life is devoted to the ideal. We feel some type of closeness with them. If we're traveling in India and we see a sadhu wearing Garawa, and we find that, oh, he's a monk of the Ramakrishna order, a certain special, we feel something with all monks, but a certain special feeling, closeness. So Thakur, of course, he loved everyone, felt oneness with everyone, but meeting another sadhu, he feels some very special bond. They form friendship so quickly. He invites him to Dakshineswar, he comes later and everything. So Sri Ramakrishna looked upon him as a friend of long acquaintance, and they walked arm in arm. The master arrived at Surendra's garden. The very first thing he talked about was the sadhu. Master. Now the sadhu, he's just under the tree. He doesn't live there. He probably hasn't been invited. In those days, probably today in some parts of India, if a sadhu came and there was a little cot set up under a tree, they would go there, they could stay there. Very often sadhus would stay in somebody's garden, and they'd have a garden house or something like that, and people would be happy. They wouldn't ask questions. Not everybody, of course, but so it's very interesting there. Not that he's invited inside to the house or anything like that, but also not kicked out. So he's just staying there. Maybe he'll just wander away another day and look for another tree to sleep under. Gach tole sadhu. They just wander in the sky, their roof, the grass, they bed. Like Swamiji song of the sannyasin. Master, he's a very nice man. To Ram, bring him to Dakshineswar when you come. He is really a good man. There's a line in the song to the effect that a man cannot recognize a holy person unless he is holy himself. The actual word is shahaj. Unless one is simple, one won't recognize the simple one. One of the names of God, the simple one. The sadhu believes in God without form. Probably they had a longer conversation together and probably didn't hear everything also. That is good. See, he's not criticizing him. That is good. God is both formless and endowed with form. He is many things more. Now, the form, this was the first thing that M first heard that. He said, these are two contradictory things. How can there be form and formlessness at the same time? But I like this example. Thakur says, what is Brahman like? Brahman is like water. Huh? Water never comes without a form, but it's never restricted by a form. So it's formless even when it's in a cup and has a certain form. It's still formless in essence, in nature. You remove that cup and it just spills out and everything. If it really had that form, it would remain with that form. So the essence of it is formless, but it takes any form. This is how Sri Ramakrishna, his understanding of the Brahman. Brahman will take any form. Whatever color we want to dye, it'll take that dye for us. God is both formless and endowed with form. He is many more things. The absolute and the relative, Nitya and Lila. The absolute and the relative belong to one and the same reality. So when we talk about Ishvara, this is creator, we talk about Brahman, they're not two different things. They're one and the same. When we talk about Virat, there's a whole universe, a manifestation of that same infinite power, that same Brahman. What is beyond speech and mind is born in the flesh, assuming various forms and engaging in various activities. From that one have sprung Om Shiva, Om Kali, and Om Krishna. Suppose the master of a house has sent out a small boy of the family to invite people to a feast. All look on the boy with great fondness and affection because he is the son or grandson of a prominent man. So this avatar, that we understand as avatar, is kind of God's representative on earth. So somehow, we don't have to have any very clear understanding of how it works. How is it different, that divine manifestation in Sri Ramakrishna, than God dwelling within all beings? It's beyond our ability to fully comprehend how that works and how that happens. But to have that faith and to recognize the difference between these great souls and ordinary souls, it's enough. We don't have to know the process by which it takes place and everything in order to get the benefit from it, because the life of avatar, and of course for us the life of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, the divine qualities we see in them are more than we can imagine even. And Thakur says, by worshiping the avatar, we're worshiping God. Swami Swananji, he used to say that avatar is as good as God. He had a very simple way of putting things. As good as God. That means don't bother too much. Don't make a big distinction. You're meditating on Sri Ramakrishna, on Krishna, on Rama. Is it different from meditating on Shiva or Durga? Is that different from meditating on the Nirguna Brahman, Saguna Brahman? We're trying to fix our minds on divinity. And that's enough. It'll accomplish the same goal. Thursday, December 27th, 1883. So that's the end of that day. We have a new day. The temple garden, so now they're back at Dakshineswar, was filled with the sweet music of the dawn service, which mingled with the morning melody from the Nahabat. Leaving his bed, Sri Ramakrishna chanted the names of God in sweet tones. Then he bowed before the pictures of the different deities in his room and went to the west porch to salute the Ganges. Some of the devotees had spent the night at the temple garden, came to the master's room and bowed before him. Yeah, when they spend the night at the temple garden, some may sleep inside of his room, some on the veranda, There are different porch areas that they can just set up beds anywhere. Very informal type of thing. Spread out a mat, and that's your bed. Put a blanket down, whatever, and that's your bed. Rakal was staying with the master, and Baburam had come the previous evening. These were the two, of course, future Swami Brahmananda and Swami Premananda. These were the two that stayed with Sri Ramakrishna most often at that time, along with Latu Maharaj. He also, this time, was more or less there permanently. Occasionally, probably he went back to Ram's house to run errands and things, but mostly staying at that time. Hazara was there. Who else was there? Or Ramlal would have been there at that time. Other temple workers, of course. M had been staying there 2 weeks, so this is now 2 solid weeks that M is staying, spending every day and every night with Sri Ramakrishna. The only time that he did that in Dakshineswar, that long period. Sri Ramakrishna said to M, I've been invited to Ishan's this morning. Babu Ram will accompany me, and you too. M made ready to go with the master. Now, Ishan had just met Sri Ramakrishna, I think the same year. It's amazing how close they became in such a short period of time. How many times he went to Ishan's house, not as many as Balaram's house, but still. And how often Ishan came and how they had such a close, loving relationship. And I mentioned last time that Thakur was a little tough on him and trying so hard to get this big job and everything. But Thakur loved him very much. He was really a wonderful, wonderful devotee. Died young also. At 8 o'clock, the carriage hired for the master stood waiting in front of the Nahabad. On all sides, plants and trees were in flower, and the river sparkled in the sunlight of the bright winter's day. The master bowed once more before the pictures. Then, still chanting the name of the Divine Mother, he got into the carriage, followed by M and Babu Ram. The devotees took with them Sri Ramakrishna's woolen shawl, woolen cap, and small bag of spices. Sri Ramakrishna was very happy during the trip and enjoyed it like a child. About 9 o'clock, the carriage stopped at the door of Ishan's house. Ishan and his relatives greeted the master and led them to the parlor on the first floor. Shrish, Ishan's son, was introduced to Sri Ramakrishna. The young man practiced law at Alipur. He had been a brilliant student, having stood first in 2 of the university examinations, but he was extremely modest. This seems like the first time that Sri Ramakrishna is meeting him, because he's asking questions and everything. But it also seems that he liked him very much. And he saw that a very highly qualified person. Master to Shrish, what is your profession? Shrish, I'm practicing law at Alipur. Master to him, for such a man to be a lawyer. Now, there's 2 things here. One, for such a man, that means that he sees that he's a good person. What he sees, we don't know, but that some high caliber, qualified person, that's number 1. Number 2, Sri Ramakrishna had a certain understanding about lawyers and doctors. Lawyers and doctors, that doctors, they made their living off the sickness of other people. And if he felt that they were making excessive process because of the illness of others, then he said if they're doing it out of a spirit of service and not charging too much money, then it's a wonderful thing. But if they're doing it, become rich that way. And yeah, some people will say, well, my child wants to be a doctor, please bless him, that'll be successful. So I think with the Holy Mother said, how can I do that? That means that I'm praying for people to be sick. Anyhow, with lawyers, also the idea is that somebody may be guilty of something, and you have to try to prove that he's innocent. Huh? So how can one practice truthfulness and everything, and involved in lawsuits? And during Thakur's time, for some reason, there were lawsuits right and left. Everyone was engaged in lawsuits. Huh? Yeah. So mostly just to get money. So Thakur didn't have a very high opinion of lawyers. Now, if anyone out there listening who's a lawyer, that if he knew how many good lawyers there are who really defend people who need someone to help them, and the civil rights lawyers, so many different things, that I'm sure he would appreciate that also. For such a man to be a lawyer, to Shris, well, have you any questions to ask? Perhaps you want to know how to live unattached in the world. Isn't that so? Now, how does Thakur know what he wants to ask? Huh? He knew these things. That it was a gift, some special power, not psychic power, but and just he would say he could see the insides of a person the way we can see the inside of a glass case. We can see the china that's kept there and the cabinet and everything. He had that ability. Shirish, under the pressure of duties, people do many unrighteous things in the world. Further, some are engaged in good work and some in evil. Is this due to their actions in previous births? Is that why they act this way? Now, Sri Ramakrishna is usually pretty good at answering questions. Huh? Every once in a while, he won't answer the question exactly. Maybe he'll know that that's not really the question that you want, that you're hiding something a little bit, or that's really not so important. So he won't waste his time too much. So it's very interesting here. He doesn't exactly answer the question, but he gives a beautiful answer, probably what is most helpful. Master, how long should a man perform his duties? See, nothing to do with the question. Now, one thing is, probably in his mind, he's saying, you worry about yourself. Don't worry about what other people are doing too much. That could be part of what he's thinking. We can only guess. But anyhow, his answer is interesting. How long should a man perform his duties? Now, this is probably a young man. Not that he's ready to retire or do anything like that. But Thakur must see something in him. He must really feel this is someone qualified to lead a good spiritual life, who should even now not get too entangled in things, lessen his duties a little bit. As long as he has not attained God, duties drop away after the realization of God. Then one goes beyond good and evil. The flower drops off as soon as the fruit appears. The flower serves the purpose of begetting the fruit. How long should a devotee perform daily devotions such as the Sandhya? This was a very common example for Thakur, because he saw this. Many times, devotees would come to him, and if they were Brahmin, especially, they would say, "Oh, please excuse us now, sir. We have to go and do our Sandhya." When the sun would go down at that time, and sometimes he would say, "Oh, because here he's sitting there talking, they can have his company, which is more important." Sometimes he would say, not so important. Other times, I mean, he knew what everyone was fit for, but it was a common theme that it really stood for too much of ritual. Because Sandhya Vandana, this I don't know all the rituals, but those who do it can take a long time to do all these rituals and things. And then repeating Gayatri, some will go even go chest deep in the Ganga with this, looking at the sun ahead, and do it at that time. I don't know. Sandhya Vandana take a long time to do. Yeah, so it's a big thing. Huh? So Thakur didn't emphasize his rituals so much. How long should a devotee perform daily devotions such as the Sandhya? as long as his hair does not stand on end and his eyes do not shed tears at the name of God. Yeah, so he is not. Yeah, there must be some in between also. That see, because they'll say you can give up the Sandhya, but don't give up Gayatri. Then you can give up Gayatri and just do Om. Then you can give up. By the time we're ready to give up Om, then we have to have the hair standing on end. But it'll be a gradual thing. As we go a little deeper in spiritual life, then we can lessen the rituals accordingly that way. These things indicate that the devotee has realized God. So he's not saying continue with all of these things until you realize God. But once someone realizes God, these four things fall off completely. Absolutely unnecessary. Otherwise, there's some value to these things, but he says let this long ritualistic thing, and let that just be merged in just repetition of Gayatri Mantra. That's enough. And then if you really go deep in that Om, repeat Om, that's enough. That'll be a very final high stage. There's always a question. Many of the monks who join, Brahmin boys, yeah, who were initiated with the Gayatri and everything, and very often they, after taking initiation, or even brahmacharya, after taking initiation, should we continue with this Gayatri? And generally, I think they're told, yeah, there's no harm, continue with that. Huh? This is your family tradition and everything. After sannyasa, different story.
In fact, for brahmacharya diksha, we are given.
Of course, during the 4 years of brahmacharya, the part of the brahmacharya ceremony is upanayana, is getting the sacred thread, is getting Gayatri Mantra, and we have to do it for those years until we take the sannyasa.
Only instead of Sandhya Vandana, we have a more focused upasana.
Yeah. Without doing all the rituals of Sandhya Vandana, but repetition of Gayatri Mantra. Yeah. But some before brahmacharya, before getting that, who have taken Gayatri initiation as a child, who have the sacred thread and everything, they ask that question: should we continue to do it? So these, the hair standing on end, shedding tears, these indicate that the devotee has realized God. From these, one knows that he has attained pure love of God. Realizing God, one goes beyond virtue and vice. Dharma, adharma. That doesn't mean we can do bad things. It means that whatever we do will be good. That we don't have to consider these things. And dharma, this can also mean what we find in the scriptures, that we have to do this, we can't do that. We go beyond this scriptural injunction. Then Thakur sings the song, I bow my head, says Prasad, before desire and liberation. Knowing the secret that Kali is one with the highest Brahman, I have discarded once for all both righteousness and sin. The more you advance toward God, the less he will give you worldly duties to perform. So the question was about people doing bad things and everything. And Thakur is really telling him, don't worry too much about that. But you'll see that what you think is your duty and your obligation, all of these things, that you'll realize that your main duty and obligation is God realization. And these other things will start to gradually fall off. Shrish, it is extremely difficult to proceed toward God while leading the life of a householder. Master, why so? What about the yoga of practice? Now, it's extremely difficult to proceed toward God, that we can all agree. But while leading the life of a householder, this is Thakur's point, even leading the life of a householder, everybody can find time to do this spiritual practice. And this yoga of practice, abhyasa yoga, this we all have to do. We have to just keep trying to improve our concentration and devotion and change the samskaras through constant practice. At Kamarpukur, I've seen the women of the carpenter family selling flattened rice. Let me tell you how alert they are while doing their business. The pestle of the husking machine that flattens the paddy constantly falls into the hole of the mortar. The woman turns the paddy in the hole with one hand, and with the other holds her baby on her lap as she nurses it. In the meantime, customers arrive. The machine goes on pounding the paddy, and she carries on her bargains with the customers. She says to them, "Pay the few pennies you owe me before you take anything more." You see, she has all these things to do at the same time. He's talking about all the worldly duties that householders have. Nurse the baby, turn the paddy as the pestle pounds it, take the flattened rice out of the hole, and talk to the buyers. This is called the yoga of practice. 15 parts of her mind out of 16 are fixed on the pestle of the husking machine, lest it should pound her hand. That means we can keep, what is that, 15 sixteenths? That's more than 75%. Sometimes we hear 75%. We can keep that amount of the mind on God and our spiritual practice with the little remaining concentration. If it's concentrated, we can do all of our worldly duties. With only one part of her mind, she nurses the baby and talks to the buyers. Likewise, he who leads the life of a householder should devote 15 parts of his mind to God. Otherwise, he will face ruin and fall into the clutches of death. He should perform the duties of the world with only one part of his mind. Okay, then it goes on. We'll stop here. Volka?
In Bengali,
Yeah.
out of solo ana, we keep only one ana for the.
Yeah. So this was the way they would do percentages. Atana means 8 annas out of 16, 50%. And Bharavana is 75%. So this Paravana, 15 sixteenths. So they didn't do things with 10%, 20%, 30%. They did it out of just the way they did it. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukham Bhatudvikraham Vai Ishavataram Varameshamidiham Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace. Peace be unto us.